Hello, I am Drew Kaplan, and this is my grandmother, Beatrice Sowald. I am also the eldest grandson of Beatrice Sowald. So I'm very curious, Grandma B, to hear about what you remember from growing up, and more specifically about your parents and grandparents.
Okay, well, that's a fair question.
Yeah.
So let me go back since you want my grandparents.
Well, first of all, where and when were you born, and where did you grow up?
Okay, I was born in, as far as I know, Amsterdam, New York. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in Amsterdam, New York, although at one time we lived in Hartford, Connecticut.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we lived for a short period of time in Hartford, Connecticut. I don't know what my daddy was doing there.
Okay.
When we lived in Amsterdam, though, from time to time, my grandmother on my mother's side, my mother's mother, would live with us because we lived in the family home, the Gray family home.
Okay.
So my grandmother, when she was in town and not visiting her other children, would stay with us.
Okay. So let's start off with professions. What did your parents do?
Okay, so...
And then also, where did they come from?
Okay, so my mother and father were both born in either Poland or Russia because
the borders shifted.
The borders shifted. And they came over... It was my grandparents who came over from Poland, Russia. Mm-hmm. And my mother and father met sometime along the way, and they were married like in 1920-something. Mm-hmm. How they met, I still don't know. But my grandfather Gray, Max Gray, when he came over with 3 of his children, then he had 3 more when he was here.
So that's your mother's father. Your mother's father.
This is my mother's father, my mother's side of the family. And he had a ladies' ready-to-wear.
Okay.
It's the dress goods and everything, and I'll assume that was what the push cart was, and then he had a store. It was called Gray's, Gray's Women. So my mother worked for him, and he would send her to New York to go to the wholesalers. Yeah. Typical, and she would get the clothes. She would make the orders for the store. That's what my mother did. My dad had, at some point that I knew mostly growing up, was a theater. But going back to my grandparents, Ida and Max Gray, Ida didn't work, of course. She didn't speak English, so she always spoke Yiddish. So if you want me to ask her a question, she'd have to answer it, she'd have to have my mother translate.
Oh.
So if you want to know if my grandma Ida Gray or my grandpa Max Gray and I ever spoke, the answer is not really.
Wow. It was Yiddish. They just did Yiddish.
That was Yiddish. So, and then it was like that's what they talked when they didn't want us to know what they were saying because they knew we didn't understand it.
So, and so they came over with your mom.
Yes, my grandfather Max and my grandmother Ida already had 3 of their 6 children here. My mother.
Should we? Here, we have a visual here. Let's see.
Yeah, if you can see it.
Yeah, I can always zoom in on this. So we have.
So my grandpa is this guy in the mustache.
Yeah.
And my grandmother is this stern-looking person over here. And here's her 3 daughters.
Yeah.
That's my mother.
Oh,
right there. This is one of her daughters. This is her daughter, and this is her daughter. This is actually a boy.
Yeah.
So this is my mother. This is my Aunt Sarah. This is my Aunt Esther.
So your mom was the oldest of their 6.
My mother was the oldest daughter. Right.
Okay.
So that's about all I know about them.
That's the Grays, right?
Typically, he probably was, was a push cart with the clothing, and anyway, at some point they settled in Amsterdam, New York, and I don't know why they landed in Amsterdam, New York. He didn't have any, neither my grandma or grandpa had relatives there, but they settled in Amsterdam, New York.
How old was your mom when they moved over to America?
I'm going to see she was about 3 or 4.
Okay.
Maybe 5. I'm not exactly certain how old she was.
Mm-hmm. But so her younger siblings would have been born here in America.
3 of them who were born here.
Yeah.
And my mother probably went to school in Amsterdam. Okay. I mean, she if she had any accent when she came over from Europe, from Poland, Russia, she didn't have it at all that I knew. Mm-hmm. So my mother growing up with my grandpa worked in his store, Ladies Ready to Wear. And as I said, she would go to New York to get things. Mm-hmm. After she and my dad got married, they lived in Amsterdam, and they lived in Hartford, Connecticut, mm-hmm. and then back in Amsterdam, mm-hmm. where my father ran a movie theater. Uh-huh. And my mother worked in Penny's, got a job working in Penny's.
Yeah. So what about your father's side? When did your father's
side
family
are the
come
Chronics,
over?
And they settled in North Adams, Massachusetts. And if you ever go to North Adams, Massachusetts, there's Chronics all over the place. Okay. And I don't know anything about their history because we would see them. We would drive to North Adams. I don't remember them coming to Amsterdam. Uh-huh. So we would go to visit my aunts there. Mm-hmm. Now, my dad passed away when he turned 65, and it's easy to remember because he got his first Social Security check, and we had to send it back because he didn't live for the whole month.
Oh, wow.
But he also, when he no longer had the theater, he worked for the Navy Depot. So we were in Amsterdam. About 15 miles away was Scotia, where the Navy Depot was. And my dad being a veteran, because my dad was a veteran from the First World War.
Oh, he was in the First World War?
He was in the service.
Really?
He was in the service for the First World War. He was a veteran.
Do you know what he did in the First World War?
No, I don't know what he did. I don't hardly know what my husband did in the Second World War. He was a veteran, too. I think my husband was in the medics,
Oh, yeah.
So that's what he did in the medics.
I'm shocked. Someone in our family doing something medical?
Well, yeah. I mean, supposedly Debbie,
my aunt, yeah.
Your aunt is in the medical thing. She has a doctor of psychology. She's a doctor of psychology.
But nothing to do with blood or cutting.
Nothing to do with blood. No, we won't even say the word blood.
Yeah. So he was... Okay, so your father was in World War I? He fought in World War I?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. He was a veteran. We had all the flags and everything. And so when he got very sick, he was in the Veterans Hospital in Albany, Schenectady. And that's where he passed away, in the Veterans Hospital. So
how did he get from North Adams to your mom?
I don't know where he and my mom met. I sort of thought they met in Washington or something like that. Because at one time my mother was working in Washington. My mother worked for the government someplace, I know. My mother went to college. My mother went to... It's Columbia, the Women's of Columbia.
Oh, yeah, Barnard.
Yeah, Barnard. My mother went to Barnard. She was going to be a phys ed teacher. Okay. And, I mean, what did you do when you were then? You were going to be a teacher, and she was going to be a phys ed teacher. Yeah. Probably tennis, I don't know, because it was tennis that my mom and dad played all the time. Yeah, I remember that very much. My mom went to Columbia, the women's college, for about a year. And then her father said, "You got to come back. I need you."
Really?
So he needed her in the business. So that's all she had was 1 year of college. Oh, wow. Now, her sister Sarah went to Cornell, got to go to Cornell and got to go all the way through. And that was Sarah. Uh-huh. And...
Right, that's also upstate.
Yeah, she married and settled in Stamford, Connecticut. So I have all the Franks lived in Stamford, Connecticut. Esther married Burkhart, moved to Brooklyn, and she grew up and raised her kids in Brooklyn. David was the youngest, and David, when he was, I don't know what age, got polio.
Oh, really?
Back then, before they had Sabin, and he had polio, and he survived it, but he had a bad leg and limp, so he limped a lot. So those are just things about everybody.
Well, how many are you in touch with? Any of their kids?
Oh yes.
Like, I guess they'd be your cousins then.
Yeah, and you met them. You met them at Alexis's wedding. Okay. They all came to Alexis's wedding.
Oh, wonderful.
So She had a daughter, Anne, and a son, Bill. Anne came to the wedding. Sarah had 3 children. I don't think they got to come to the wedding.
Okay.
Let me see. Anne came. Joyce came. So Joyce is this guy's daughter. Joyce Gray was this guy's daughter, and she came to the wedding. So Joyce came to the wedding. Anne came to the wedding. Who else came with your wedding? No,
to
Alexis's wedding here in Columbus.
Right.
That's who came here. I'll think about it. I'll remember who all came.
So you were saying your mother only did the 1 year at Barnard?
Yes.
Came back to Amsterdam to help your father with the business?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how, and everybody that I could ask, all of her sisters her sisters and brothers aren't alive anymore.
Yeah.
So I can't even ask. In those days, we never just talked about family.
Really?
I mean, we didn't say, where did you come from and what did you do and where did you, we didn't say, we just talked family.
Huh. Okay. Wow. So you're not sure where your mom met your father, whether it was through D.C., whether maybe he came through Amsterdam?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if somebody fixed them up or something. I don't know. But I know that she was living in Amsterdam, and I know when they came back from their honeymoon, I mean, I hear the story, how the stories are. When she and my dad came back, my Aunt Esther and my Aunt Sarah met them at the station.
Uh-huh.
And the story is, they thought, after she got married and came back from honeymoon, she'd change. She would be different.
Okay.
Somehow or another she'd be nicer. But my mother
she maintained a more was she kind of like your
I don't know
your grandmother there?
No, but apparently the first thing she said when she saw
her sisters
Esther there is, "Where'd you get that awful hat?"
Wow. Was she a tough cookie? A little critical?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my mother's side of the family. As I said, I saw my father's side of the family, and I knew them. And the thing was, I know that my dad went to Boston College and got a law degree.
Oh,
I know that.
Oh, wow.
And I know when he got some kind of a government job in Boston.
Yeah, and those were all before he met your mom.
Yes, that was before he met my mom.
Yeah.
And then the family in North Adams said they needed him there to help run the store. So I know that he went and moved. He was living in North Adams, probably with one of his siblings or something like that, helping run the grocery store. It was a grocery store.
Oh, it was a grocery store.
Grocery store.
Okay.
I know that. I have no idea what he did, where they met. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody fixed them up or introduced them.
Yeah.
They might have met at a wedding. I don't know.
What do you know about your father's parents?
Nothing about
not
my
even
father.
when they came over?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't know if they came over first or it was his siblings and all who came over.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Was he a child like your mother when the family came over to America? Or was he born here already?
I think my dad was born here in North Adams. I think he was born in North Adams. Okay. Yeah. Somebody sent me one of those census things.
Yeah.
And it says where they were born. Uh-huh. And I'm trying to think if my daddy said Russia. I think my daddy said Russia, and my mom had said Russia, Poland.
Uh-huh.
So I think he was born there, but obviously he became a citizen and so forth because he served in the First World War. Yeah.
Wow. So he served in the First World War, became a lawyer.
Yes.
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 Wow.
Yes. Wow. He never, by the time he got married and we came along, he wasn't practicing law. Mm-hmm. So that was before and back then, lawyers didn't make big money.
Oh, really?
Oh, no.
Oh.
It was, lawyers was not a big money thing.
Oh, wow.
It was, I don't know when lawyers became big money things, but it was just something you did. Like, I think that they thought doctors made more money than lawyers did. Yeah. And I don't know what kind of law he had. I have the impression he got a government job as a lawyer. So it was probably in some agency or something like that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So,
I'm sorry that I didn't ask. And the other thing is, if I had asked, I might have forgotten whatever they said. So they probably were talking about it. Yeah. They probably talked about it, but it wasn't that I just sat down and started asking questions. How did you and Mom? And for me to find out, my cousins don't know. In other words, my cousins
in Massachusetts.
My cousins
on your mom's side,
that are other places. My cousins that were in Brooklyn, grew up in Brooklyn, or in Stamford, Connecticut. That's where they grew up on that side. And then Birmingham, Alabama was my one uncle Nate moved to Birmingham, Alabama. That's who else was there. Joyce was at the wedding. Uh-huh. Joyce was there with her husband too. Uh-huh. They live in Texas now, but Joyce and her husband were at Alexis's wedding.
Oh, wonderful. So what did your father do in Amsterdam?
In Amsterdam, he had a theater. He had the Orpheum Theater until he lost it. Okay, so back then...
So a drive-in or actually a sit-in movie theater?
An actual movie theater where I saw the Westerns. And I got to go on Saturday, and I got to take friends in for free.
Yeah.
So what happened there in the theater was he was an independent who had a theater. And there was a thing called the Shines. The Shines had all these chains, and they would get the A pictures. So all my dad could get was the B pictures, the Westerns and the serials. And the Westerns were such that continued, they called the cliffhangers.
Yeah.
Somebody's about to fall off the cliff, and you have to see the next episode the following week. So then he got a job, as I said, at the Naval Depot. And he did some kind of office stuff there. He was very well respected because, not everybody had been a veteran and was a lawyer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was that.
Anything else you remember from growing up?
From growing up, well, yes. So, we lived in the family home, the Gray family home on 2 Summit, until my daddy actually became ill and wound up in the hospital.
When you say the Gray family home, that meant it was your mother's parents' house?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, one of her brothers also lived in Amsterdam, lived in Amsterdam, and then they moved to Utica, New York. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they moved to Utica. When we lived in the family home at 2 Summit, that was a big home, and that's where we would have the Seders. And my uncles would come. We would have the Seders there. Uh-huh. And my mother, of course, always kept kosher. Everybody always kept kosher back then. Oh yeah. My mother kept kosher. Oh, yeah. When we were living at 2 Summit, kept kosher.
Oh, wow.
Because that's where everybody came, and they'd come for the Seders. And I remember, the uncles would always tease. As they were getting drunker and drunker, they would tease us. Uh-huh. So I remember that, and that was again on the Gray side, on my mother's side.
And your father's family also kept kosher growing up?
I'll assume so. I couldn't tell you. We ate what we ate, when we were there. I'll assume it was kosher. Okay. After all, they had a grocery store. They could afford to. You have a grocery store. You can, you got the store. You can afford to keep it. And we kept kosher in our house at 2 Summit. Oh. And when we moved to Brookside, we still tried to keep kosher. And then the war came.
World War II.
The World War II. And there were rations. When you have rations, and you couldn't get the kosher meat unless you drove to Schenectady, and nobody had the rations for gas to drive to Schenectady.
Oh, wow.
Where there would be a kosher butcher. Yeah. So slowly, we stopped. Having said we stopped, let me say that having always kept milk and meat separate, we still did. We still didn't, if she made chicken, she made it with chicken fat. She never used
anything dairy with the chicken.
Yeah, we still kept the milk separate from the fleischiks, but the meat was no longer the kosher meat.
Uh-huh. And what happened to your father's theater?
I don't know much except that he lost it. When I say lost it, he no longer was able to get the Shines.
They had the A movies. He only had the B movies, so there's less demand.
And I think that we just phased out. I think that's when my dad, it was just too much on him, and he just had a little nervous breakdown.
And he was already that's when he was working at the Naval Depot.
No, right? After he got well, after he got well after the nervous breakdown, then he got a job at the depot, and that was where he was working till the day he died.
Oh wow!
Oh yeah, I mean till he got sick and went into the Veterans Hospital.
Yeah,
but they keeping his job open or whatever, because they really liked him. I don't know if he was. I don't know if he was head of a department. All I know is they all respected him and liked him.
That's really neat. What do you remember about your grandparents?
Okay, well,
anything else about them or their temperaments or their personalities?
I don't even remember ever talking to my grandpa.
Really? Okay.
I just don't have. I know. My grandmother, I would fix her hair. She wanted me to comb her hair, and she'd sit in the chair. But so she had the long hair that I'd comb or brush, whatever, and fix her hair.
Yeah.
But she'd always talk in Yiddish, so I didn't really know what she was saying. But I never had any conversations with my grandma.
Yeah. And then your parents, how would you describe their personalities or characteristics?
Okay, yeah. Well, they had a lot of friends, all the Jewish friends, and even when we had to move out of Tucson to move to Brookside, they still kept the same friends who were well-to-do. Okay. They were all well-to-do. And I have my older brother, Al, and by the time we moved to Brookside, I know my brother got a job working in a factory. It was I'll think of the name of it later on. And it was called, not locomotive, but something like that. He'd come all just really filthy, he was working with machinery and everything. He'd come home really, something like that. And then I said, then the war came, and my brother Al went to the war. Bill, my younger brother, was a kid. He was just a little boy then when the war came. During the war, I just remember, when I got out of high school, I got a job at GE because it was wartime. You get jobs. I did some kind of aptitude test, and they said, "Oh, you'll be a draftsman." So I got into the draft. I was a draftsman drafting electronic tubes. That's what we were drafting, a lot of electronic tubes. Yeah. For the engineers. So that was the first job I got when I got out of high school.
So that was after high school?
It was a full-time job after high school because the war was still on. So I wasn't going to go to college. The war was still on.
Could you not have gone to college while the war was going on?
Didn't have money at that time, and it really wasn't what we did. We all got jobs when we got out. I always knew I was going to go to college, so that, I graduated high school in 1944, so it was, not till 1945 as the war was over.
Oh, so it was only a year. It wasn't
you had started in
1942.
I only worked at GE for a year, and then I left to go to college.
Yeah.
My aunt, I have an aunt and an uncle. That's my Uncle Dave.
Yeah.
That was Uncle Dave and his wife lived in Columbus, Ohio. He worked for the Shoe Corporation. The woman he married was a Schiff, SCHIFF, and they had a shoe corporation, Schiff Shoe Corporation. And so they said, well, if you want to come here, we have Ohio State University. You can go to Ohio State University because I really wanted to go to Cornell. I had signed up to go to Cornell.
Yeah. And this is in 1945 after the war, right? So the war ended. They didn't need... Yeah, okay.
I was accepted to Cornell, but I was only second in line for the scholarship, and the person who was supposed to get the scholarship took it.
Okay.
Instead of my getting the scholarship. Now, my Aunt Sarah went to Cornell.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to go to Cornell. And the funny thing is that Alexis went to Cornell. Yes. Accidentally.
We have Hurricane Katrina to thank for that.
So anyway, that's why I moved to Columbus. They said you could stay here, you could live here, and it's not as expensive. I still had out-of-state fees because I was not a resident of Ohio.
Yeah.
But that's how I went to Ohio State.
And so how was your time at Ohio State? Was it noticeably culturally different than growing up in Amsterdam, New York, being in Central Ohio?
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
I lived with my aunt and uncle and her two girls for a while. But what was happening, I was commuting on the bus. There was a bus, the Bexley bus would take me to there was a electric car, trolley.
Oh,
a trolley on a train, trolley on a track that actually was in. It stopped where Drexel in Maine is. You know where Temple University is. It stopped there.
It's also where the Graders is.
Yeah.
Where Graders.
So there was a bus that would take me to the trolley.
Yeah.
And I'd take the trolley all the way up to campus. And it actually would go down Main Street to High Street, up High Street all the way. And I'd just take that to go. So then I started going to Hillel. And I found that I was missing so much. So I heard about this place called Gray's Manor, which is where Jewish girls were living.
Okay.
And I moved up there with still leaving my stuff like at my aunt's and uncle's so I could go there on the weekends or whatever.
When you said what were you missing?
I was missing campus life.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Whenever I'd go to Hillel, it was during the thing. They always had things on the evenings or on Sundays, and I couldn't get there.
Because of your transportation situation.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to go all the way, as I say, down Main to High and up High all the way and take it. And that's the way I went to and from school every day.
Wow.
I don't remember. It probably cost a nickel. Maybe it cost a dime, but it probably just cost a nickel. Or I probably had passes. Or I couldn't tell you that. I don't know. But I didn't have transportation, so I was able to get a place in this Gray Manor, which was all Jewish girls.
Mm-hmm. A familiar name, Gray.
Yeah, I mean, that was just funny because it was gray stone. It was called Gray Manor because it was all gray stucco or gray stone.
Oh, okay. I thought it was because another person with the Jewish surname of Gray. But no, okay.
No, I think we just called it that because of the way it looked.
Okay. So you moved there, and you were more easily able to participate in campus life. And
like so, if we had a break, there was a school break. I never went back to Amsterdam. Winter break, spring break. I just went to my aunt and uncle's in Bexley.
Oh, really?
In Columbus, yeah. I didn't have the money to take the train back and forth and back and forth.
Oh, wow.
You know, in those days, it cost money. It cost money to make long distance calls. So, you know, I'm thinking how the kids nowadays, they have their smartphones and they just call anybody anywhere and it doesn't cost anything.
Right.
You know, or your own phone. But then there was long distance calls. So I only would call home. Rarely. It was the penny postcard and the 3-cent stamp. I wrote them letters.
Oh, wow.
So that's what we did. We wrote letters.
Okay. So you moved into this Gray, what was it called? The Gray
Manor.
Gray Manor.
That was just where the Jewish girls lived.
Yeah. So
we weren't in sororities, living in sorority houses.
And so you're able to connect better with other people and be involved with Hillel life.
Yes.
And what was your major? What did you study at Ohio State?
International studies.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
What prompted your interest?
I was in Russian. And in high school, I took Spanish all the years. So I was fluent in Spanish by the time I got to college.
Oh, wow.
And I took Russian as well because that was what was...
It was the Cold War.
Well,
it was the beginning of the Cold War.
It was really early on. It was just the end of the war, the Second World War.
Yeah.
And I guess it was cold, but it was Russian. So I was either going to be like when the UN started, something with Russian or with Spanish, because I had I don't know 4 years of Spanish I think I had 2 or 3 years of Spanish at OSU. Mm-hmm. At that time, I was fluent, fluent in Spanish, and I was fluent in Russian, but
oh, wow.
Can't do it now.
Yeah.
If you don't use it, you lose it.
Right. So you had the languages. What else drove your interest?
International studies had a lot of political science, a lot of history classes. Mm-hmm.
And so those are what drove your interest?
Yes. And because I had so much political science and so forth then, but at some point then I decided I really, really, really want to be a lawyer.
But was that while you were still a student at the Ohio State University, or was that years later?
Well, both.
Yeah.
Both. I thought maybe I had law and international studies, I could put them all together.
Mm-hmm. And then, did you meet your husband while you were
at Hillel?
Oh, at Hillel. Okay, so you met him there while you were both undergrads. Yep. And then, so well, you had kids first before going into law school. There was a break there.
Yes, I'd been married for 13. I was out of college for 13 years before I went back to law school.
Yeah.
I mean, we already had all the 3 children, and we had moved over to Eastmore. Mm-hmm. And the story there is, I was talking to one of my girlfriends. Malcolm had already been bar mitzvahed. I said, I'm all done with everything's done. Because I'd already moved over, and Malcolm had been bar mitzvahed.
Yeah.
And I was talking, I said, I just always wanted to be a lawyer. We're just chatting,
Yeah.
And she said, well, why don't you? Why don't you? Mm-hmm. So I said, well, I don't know how to do it. She said, just find out. So I called the law school, OSU Law School, talked to somebody and said, how do I get into law school? She said, you have to take the LSAT. And I said, what is that? Mm-hmm. So I said, when is it? It's in 2 weeks. So anyway, she told me a number to call. I called the number, signed up. They sent me, because everybody else had already registered, because this was just going to be 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
So I get in those days it was a telegram, but it was something in addition. Oh, I know. They knocked on the door and they said, Western Union. It was Western Union. That's what it was. And it was my pass to get into the exam. Because I didn't have it already.
Yeah.
So that was that. That's how I got to be a lawyer.
You got in from your LSAT scores, and so you decided to go to the Ohio State University for law school as well.
And I had the 3 children at home.
Yeah.
And so they learned to...
Well, how young was my mom was your youngest, right?
Heather's my baby.
Right. So how young was she when you...
I think she was is she the one that was in 3rd grade? Well, let me see. So I started law school in 1963.
Okay.
So how old was she in 1963?
9.
Okay.
Well, 8. She's a December birthday, so she's probably still 8.
I think she was in 3rd grade, because I remember her saying, when the children would be talking about what their mommy did, what their dad did, and when she said her mother was a lawyer by then, I said, no, women aren't lawyers.
Oh, really?
She was, when she said my mom is a lawyer or going to law school, I don't know which it was, but I couldn't tell you which. You'll have to ask Heather if she remembers. I said, no, women don't.
Wow.
And the story for you is just the opposite. You've heard your story.
Yes. Yes. Growing up, I think someone asked me if I wanted to become a lawyer.
Well, you were in the car.
Uh-huh.
You were riding in the car.
Yeah.
And I guess somebody asked you, do you want to be a lawyer? And you said, no, only girls are lawyers. Or only women are lawyers.
Right, because you and my mom were lawyers, and
all of her friends, all of your mom's friends were, many of your mom's friends were lawyers.
Yep. So you pursued that, and then after graduating law school, then what did you immediately set up a law firm, or what did you do next?
No. When I got out of law school, it's that old story. I went, in law school, the law firms sent people over to the law schools to interview students who were graduating, and I was set up to interview with this law firm.
Okay.
And waited my turn, and when I walked in, the young man looked up at me and said, what can I do for you? I'm here for an interview. We don't hire girls. And that's where that started. We don't hire girls. So anyway, then the dean, who liked me very much, set up an appointment for me to go to see one of the justices at the Ohio Supreme Court to be like a clerk. When I went to see, he looked at me and he says, I don't know if we have any women's restrooms.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Now, of course, I mean, I'm sure that
I'm
sure they had secretaries, huh?
In the courthouse?
Yeah. No, it would be the Supreme Court, at the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So anyway, where I did get a job was at Legal Aid. There were 3 of us hired for 3 different offices. And so I went and got a job with Legal Aid. I'm very glad I got the job with Legal Aid. I mean, Very good experience.
Oh, yeah? What was good about that experience? What did you enjoy about having
Well,
it?
because I was at one point, I was a one attorney office, a one-time office, and we did everything.
Huh.
I didn't do common pleas, but we did municipal court, so we did the misdemeanors, we did bankruptcies, we did domestic, we did everything, so I got
a wide range of experience.
Everything.
Yeah.
Not big real estate deals, not corporate deals, but things like landlord-tenant.
Mm-hmm.
They always had the problem. Municipal court got a lot of juvenile cases, juvenile delinquents into juvenile. So got a lot of experience.
Yeah, so that's late 60s. Then.
I graduated in 66, passed the bar in 66, started in 67 with legal aid, with the other two attorneys who also, they were expanding from one place to have branch offices at that time.
Oh, really?
So I was the West Side branch office, so-and-so was the North Side branch office. And ultimately, then they closed mine and I moved north and so on and so forth. But anyway, that was I had legal aid for 13 years. At that time, when I started with legal aid, people were there for 1 or 2 years. They went to get experience and then they went on, or they went to the prosecutor's office, or they only go to the office. I stayed on for 13 years and then,
Why so long?
The supervisor. Huh?
Why so long?
I liked it there.
Oh, really? Oh, you really did?
It. There was I didn't want to open my own office. I wasn't going to do this or do that. It still was not where the big firms were hiring women. They still weren't hiring women.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they still weren't hiring women, the big law firms.
Oh, wow. And then what did you do next after legal aid?
Heather. Yeah. I was there for 13 years until Heather, after she graduated law school, she said, "Okay, now," and we looked for a place to open an office, and it was left legal aid after 13 years, and we opened our office.
And how did you decide? Sure. How did you decide to focus on domestic relations?
It's not something you decide. It's what happens. It's what actually happens. I mean, we were open for everything. But because I had done domestic at legal aid, because by that time, after 13 years, we had actually divisions. We had domestic, and we had landlord-tenant, and we had bankruptcy. Though it started out, we did everything. By the time I got done, we were in one big building and not branch offices and all stuff like that.
Yeah.
We looked for a place to have an office, and that's how we wound up over in the village. Ace Strip was an attorney that I knew, and he said, "Oh, come and look, we've got space there." So Heather and I opened our office there, and we got a lot of publicity. The first mother-daughter law firm.
That is special. That is
first mother-daughter law firm
in Ohio.
Columbus, in Ohio,
in the entire state of Ohio.
Wow. So I mean, what was happening is I'd get notices from my law school classmates. In Toledo, they'd see it in the newspaper. Congratulations, So we got a lot of congratulations for opening our first mother-daughter law office.
And had you intended to do domestic relations when you opened, or
nope,
it just
whatever came in?
Really? Okay.
Whatever came in. And what was happening was the big law firms did not really have any domestic relations attorneys there. Okay, so when their clients would be involved in a divorce, and they were always messy and so forth, they did not want to represent their business clients in a divorce. So they would call us and send them to us.
Oh.
Because I already knew a lot of attorneys from activities and everything.
And certainly legal aid. Yeah. For all those
So
years.
anyway, they just started sending their clients to us. We never said that we were specializing. As a matter of fact, Heather wound up with a criminal case in federal court. Did she ever tell you about her criminal case in federal court? Oh, well, when I was away at some convention or something, I came back and Heather had taken on this client in federal court charged with bank robbery or something like that. Ask your mom.
Okay. All right.
Ask your mom what about it.
Okay,
She'll know all about it.
Okay.
Yeah, so her first her first criminal trial, and it was a federal trial, and it was...
Wow, that's exciting.
Of course, he was found guilty. And I didn't like criminal. I didn't like criminal because, and at some point I stopped liking juvenile, and that was a whole other story. Mm-hmm. It's just like the courts were not set up to be colorblind.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of our clients at Legal Aid were black,
mm-hmm.
and with this juvenile, it was a black child. Of course, they were guilty, but that they were not.
Really?
So at some point, I said, I'm not doing juvenile anymore. That was the end, and I stopped doing juvenile at Legal Aid.
Was that noticeable of a bias in the courts?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of courts, when did you decide to become a judge?
Oh, that's an interesting story. I never, quote, decided to be a judge. One day I was in court, and Judge Rose, who was a D, called me up and he said, Are you a D? And I said, what? Are you a Democrat? And I said, yes. He said, come back and see me in my office. So I went back into his office.
Yeah.
And he said, so Judge Macklin, who was new on the bench, or had been a judge in Muni Court and was on it, Judge Macklin is losing it, and he's going to retire. And I'd like you to take his seat. At that point, we had a Democratic governor.
Was this the 80s, 90s?
That was 1984.
1984. Okay.
1984. In 1984, so he said, are you a D? He said, well, this is what you have to do. You have to go down to the courthouse and get a statement that shows you registered as a Democrat. And then I'll set you up with the Democratic committee that will put you on as so forth. And they sent it, and Celeste was the governor. No, it wasn't Celeste. It was Gilligan.
Okay.
Gilligan, Judge Gilligan. Governor Gilligan was the governor then. So he appointed me to that position, and then I had to run. So it was 84, which was an election year, and I had to run. This was in September, so I had the part of September and October to run for this job. And I lost. Oh yeah. The D's put up a named candidate to run against me. His name was Petrie.
Okay.
So Judge Petrie had been a judge before, and his father before him had been a judge. So Judge Petries were all over the place. So they put Judge Petrie up to run against me, and he won. Yeah. So then, meanwhile, it was 84, so it was a statewide and common pleas, not Muni Court. So at the same time, I get a call from a judge, a common pleas court judge that I knew, who won a seat in the Supreme Court. He had run for the Supreme Court, so his seat was going to be open. And he called me. He said, B, I want you to take my seat. And I said, no, I don't want to take your seat. It's common pleas. That has the murder cases, and I couldn't handle a murder case. I said, but there's going to be Petrie's job, and Muni's going to be, because he's taking my seat, I'll take Petrie's seat. Okay. So I went into municipal court.
And how long were you in that court?
Okay, so then I had to run, because then that became 85, and 85 was local, so that was municipal court judge, and I had to run again. And they put up a name. I mean, I was doing really well, but they put up a name, and I didn't win that one either.
Okay.
So that's when. Meanwhile, I went back with Heather. So then we were back being Sowald and Sowald again.
Yeah. Okay. And I know that you've put together, is it the Ohio Domestic Relations sort of law book?
Okay, so I'll tell you the story on that. That's not a very long story. So one of the things I was all along was very active in the state bar.
Oh, okay.
And in the state bar had a family law committee.
Yeah.
And to be on that committee at that time, when I got on the committee, you had to have your local, the OSBA selectmen or whatever appoint you. So I got appointed to the Family Law Committee somebody else had recommended me this. So anyway, so I got on the family law committee. So I was on the family law committee for I don't know how long, and then I became vice chair and chair. I got to be, like your mom did, all those things you get to be. So I was chair of the family law committee, and this person came up to me and said, I have a publishing company and I want to put together a book on family law. Would you be willing to review what I have, and would you be able to do this? To make a long story short, he wanted me to be editor.
And what year is this?
So that would have been, I think it was about 84, 83. All of this was all at the same time.
The early 80s must have been a very exciting time.
Yeah, all of this was at the same time.
In addition, obviously, to becoming a grandmother at that time.
Yeah, well, in addition, my husband had died in 83.
Oh, so
my husband died in 83, and so when 84 came to be on the bench, it was fine. And when they came to see me, that was in 83, 84, about that. I mean, I had no husband, and all the kids were gone.
And you were a grandmother.
Yeah, well.
To two grandchildren. 81 and 83, your first two.
So, I said I would do that, but I needed a co-editor. I didn't want to be the only editor. So this Stan Morgenstern was on my family law committee, and he had been in charge of case review, talking about cases. And I said, if Stan will agree to be my co-editor. And that's how it happened. And when we started, I still have the first book that we published, and it was in notebook form, so you could open it up, take out, add every year. So that's what we did for years.
Yeah.
I still have it. It was just like a notebook. That was the first domestic relations law book.
For Ohio.
It's only Ohio law. Right. So that's how the book came to be, and it just kept growing and growing and growing, and now it's 3 volumes.
That's really great. Can I go back to...
Yeah, you can go any direction
All right,
you want.
then I'm going to go in a different direction and pick up. So you said growing up, you grew up in a kosher household, at least up until World War II with the rations.
Right.
So when you moved
even though we didn't, I mean, I suppose she'd buy hot dogs that weren't kosher.
Yeah.
But we still kept milk from Fleischer.
Yeah.
Okay, so then after I got, and then I don't remember if my aunt and uncle kept kosher. I don't know. I do know that Gray Manor was kosher. And we would have these young Jewish dental students come and serve our meals. Not breakfast, but dinner. They would come and they'd get their meals. They would be helping to serve the meals. And a separate subject has nothing to do with anything else. Sure. One of the times the dental student says, is anybody here welcome? We want to have one of your molars pulled. And I know one of the dentists had said, at some point you're going to need your wisdom tooth pulled. So I got a free wisdom tooth pulled from there. But that's another funny story.
Yeah. So you don't know if your Uncle Dave kept kosher in the house or not, but
I do
Gray
not
Manor
know
they
if
did.
Aunt Mary and Uncle Dave kept kosher. I do not know. But the same year that I got married and the same year that I graduated was the year they moved from Bexley to Maine. They moved to a shoe factory in Maine.
The state of Maine.
He was going to run the shoe factory in Maine.
Oh, wow.
So they had already left Columbus by that time.
And then the house and then when you were raising children. So
yeah, well, first we lived, the first house so that's another story too. So while I was pregnant with Malcolm, my husband and I were out walking because we walked for exercise. And one of the places we walked by was there were 2 new houses being built on North Virginia Lee Road.
Yeah.
And one was open. And so we walked in, and there was a man there. We were just looking. So we wound up buying the house at 170 North Virginia Lee Road.
Yeah.
And he said, well, Mr. Fisher said, I'm going to need some money. So my husband pulled out a $10 bill, and he handed him, okay, for $10 we bought the house. No, that's not the cost. That was
down payment.
Whatever you call
Earnest
it.
money? Earnest money?
Earnest money.
Yeah.
$10 was the earnest money for the house. And it wasn't done. The house wasn't done. So by the time it was finished and I had Malcolm, we moved in.
Mm-hmm. How long were you at that house?
13 years.
13 years. And then you moved over to Eastman.
We were starting to look anywhere because, the kids get bigger and bigger and the house was smaller and smaller.
Yeah. Was that about the time you started law school when you moved to Eastmore Boulevard?
Yes. I'd already, and Malcolm already had his bar mitzvah. We were already there having the bar mitzvah, yes. Mm-hmm. All of that about the same time. So at some point, Marty had been talking to friends. Marty had looking around for houses, and we looked in Bexley, and there were, for the same price, could have bought this big, big old house. You had to go through one bedroom to get to another bedroom,
Yeah.
So anyway.
So did you keep kosher at all?
Yes.
Raising kids?
Yes. So we kept kosher. I kept kosher so that my in-laws would be able to come and visit and come with us.
And where were they living?
On Livingston, the corner of Livingston and James. All that land
When did they move to Ohio? Your in-laws?
My in-laws?
Yeah. Or are they just from?
They were always here.
Oh, they were from Columbus. Okay.
Well, they're from Poland, Russia as well.
Yeah.
But a whole bunch of Sowalskis, moved here. So I couldn't tell you anything about them.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you anything at all about them. And I don't know who could.
So they kept kosher. Your in-laws kept kosher.
And so I kept kosher too.
So that whenever they came over.
Right. So in case they'd come over to eat. Mm-hmm. So at some point, I've always been very cautious about money. Mm-hmm. Growing up not wealthy at that point after we had the setback. And I would go to the store and see that chicken, which I was paying, say, 75 cents a pound for, was like 15 cents a pound or 20 cents a pound. Mm-hmm. And I saw that they were never coming over. We were always, all the holidays were at their house. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't come over to my house. Mm-hmm. So I said, why am I keeping kosher? You don't care. Marty didn't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. So I stopped keeping kosher then.
Mm-hmm. As far as buying kosher meat, did you still keep milk and meat separate? Yeah. And avoid pork and shellfish? Like how did?
Oh yeah, I never had that in the house. Never had ham or bacon in the house. I still didn't have any of that. And I still cook when I still make the schmaltz and still make my meat meals with the schmaltz.
Okay.
I've rendered my schmaltz.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not kosher chickens, but I still render I cook kosher.
Yeah.
I still don't.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
It becomes a habit.
Yes, I get it. That's nice.
When I make my brisket, I still make it the way my mom made it. I had all three children by the time we moved out of 170 North Virginia Lee Road.
Yeah. And how did you decide to start going to Beth Jacob?
That's where my in-laws went.
Oh, that's where your in-laws went.
My in-laws went. We all went to Beth Jacob. Okay. We all went to Beth Jacob. That's where my in-laws went.
Yeah.
Of course, that's where we went.
Yeah, so you must have been there for pretty much the entire time that Rabbi Stavsky was there.
Oh, yeah, entire time. Because Greenwald was there before, and then they had somebody before Stavsky that nobody liked, and then Stavsky came. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And Stavsky died in 2004, a few months before Malcolm did. I was thinking, it's like Malcolm gave up when Rabbi Stavsky. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, but I know that Rabbi Stavsky married my parents. He was the officiating rabbi because their wedding was at Beth Jacob.
Oh yeah. He married Debbie and her husband too.
Oh really? Oh wow.
Oh yeah, he married Debbie. Yeah. He married Debbie and he married Heather.
Oh wow.
Heather wound up wearing Debbie's wedding.
Oh really?
Yeah, it only been worn once,
Oh wow.
Oh yes.
Okay.
But I think that Malcolm really felt the loss of Rabbi Stavsky.
Oh, yeah? Wow.
So, when did you decide to be a rabbi?
I decided, that's a good question. I think it was towards the end of college, really.
Of which college?
Of my final time in college, my final semester. So I was at that time, I was considering, I wanted to go into a field that would help people. So social work school was a possibility. But I also had enjoyed my experiences with Jewish leadership activities. So I enjoyed those things, both the leadership components and Jewish aspects. And I saw the rabbi, being a rabbi as sort of the quintessential Jewish leader. So I applied for rabbinical school and got in. I visited November 2003 and graduated in the next month. And then I applied officially in February 2004 and I got accepted ultimately that spring.
Okay, and was that 2009 when you got your...
Yeah, 12 years ago, June 2009 I graduated.
Yeah, because sometimes I'm going through things and I saw the thing that your graduating class. I've got the copy of your graduating class and your certificate.
Oh, great. Grandma B, thank you so much. I learned a lot. I found this really insightful, and hopefully anybody watching this also greatly, appreciated and gained a lot from it.
Well, you're welcome. What I'm sorry about is that I don't have the same memory I have my friend Betty. If you've ever been to our house when she's been there, she'll be talking about things from her high school.
Yeah.
We're talking about her high school friends in her high school. I have no big memory. I have memory of things that happened in school, like this teacher or that teacher, Mosher or whatever.
Yeah.
But not the same memory. And we didn't ask questions.
Really?
We didn't. I didn't ask my grandparents. I didn't ask my mother questions. I didn't say, "How did you meet my daddy? How did he propose? Where did you go on your honeymoon?" I didn't ask any of those things.
Yeah.
I didn't think to ask those questions.
Where was the proposal and honeymoon for you?
Oh, that was my husband, Marty. He just... Okay, that's a whole thing. That I got.
Sure.
So I said I was going to Hillel.
Yeah.
Oh, when my senior year in Hillel, I was sort of dating or engaged to the person who was, like the director who came from. Right. But then on Sundays they had a dance. They always had the Sunday afternoon dance.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that part, and that's where I met Marty. And he cut in on my dancing with this guy.
Yeah.
Okay. He was a townie. He belonged, he lived here. He had a car. He had a car.
Yeah.
Okay. That was that part. The other thing was the Columbus Symphony, would come to Hillel and do things and just for show. And I wanted to go to the Columbus Symphony because I always liked going to symphonies.
Yeah.
And so Marty had asked me out, and I said, "Would you like to go to the Columbus Symphonies? I can get student tickets." So that we started going to the Columbus Symphony. And nice. I'm trying to remember how I don't know, he kept proposing all the time.
Oh, really?
It was always, will you marry me, maybe? At some point he wore me down, and that's what happened. But that's how I happened to be going with him and going to the concerts with him because he had a car.
Yeah.
To get there. And he'd pick me up at my aunt's house because he lived with his family on the corner of Livingston and James. And my aunt lived on Livingston Avenue. My aunt and uncle lived on Livingston Avenue. Their house was there. So he'd pick me up and we'd go to the concerts and so forth.
Where'd you go for your honeymoon?
Columbus.
Oh, you didn't travel anywhere?
No. None of us had money. None of us had money.
Okay.
None of us had money, honeymoon. No. We just didn't do that.
Well, thank you so much. This is really great. I appreciate it so much, Grandma.
Okay, well, you've got it for posterity for your kids.
That's right. All right, thank you.